Dr. Elena Vasquez adjusted her research pack one final time before stepping off the helicopter onto the remote landing pad carved into the mountainside. The pilot gave her a concerned look through his headset, shouting over the rotor noise. "You sure about this, Doc? These mountains are dangerous this time of year. The local wildlife gets, unpredictable." Eleanor nodded firmly, her dark hair whipping around her face in the downdraft. As a behavioral anthropologist specializing in isolated communities, she'd spent her career studying how groups adapt to extreme environments. This assignment, documenting a reclusive mountain community that had lived in isolation for generations, was the opportunity of a lifetime. "I'll be fine, Martinez. Pick me up in 2 weeks at the Southern Ridge," she called back, shouldering her heavy pack filled with research equipment, supplies, and enough food to last her fieldwork period. The helicopter lifted off, leaving Eleanor alone in the crisp mountain air. According to her research, the Wildstone Valley community lived about 8 miles deeper into the wilderness, completely self-sufficient and largely cut off from modern civilization. They'd agreed to let her document their way of life, but only if she came alone and proved she could survive in their environment. Elena had always prided herself on her independence and resilience. At 32, she'd conducted research in the Amazon rainforest, the Arctic tundra, and the Australian outback. She could handle whatever challenges these mountains threw at her. The trail down into the valley was treacherous, winding through dense pine forests and across rocky streams that required careful navigation. Elena's GPS stopped working about 2 hours in, not unusual in areas with heavy mineral deposits, but she had detailed topographical maps and enough wilderness experience to navigate by landmarks. By late afternoon, she was beginning to question her confidence. The temperature was dropping faster than she'd anticipated, and strange sounds echoed through the forest. Not the normal wildlife calls she was familiar with, but something more complex, almost like communication. Elena paused by a stream to refill her water bottles, using the purification tablets she'd brought. As she knelt by the water's edge, she became aware of a sensation she couldn't quite identify. The air felt charged, electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm. But the sky was clear. A twig snapped behind her. Elena spun around, her heart racing, but saw nothing. The forest had gone completely silent. Even the birds had stopped singing. In her experience, that usually meant a predator was nearby. She quickly secured her water bottles and stood, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. That's when she saw them. 5 figures emerged from the shadows between the trees, moving with a fluid grace that seemed almost inhuman. They were all young adults, probably in their 20s, wearing clothes that looked handmade from natural materials. But it was their eyes that made Elena's breath catch. They were watching her with an intensity that felt like being evaluated by a pack of wild animals. "Dr. Vasquez," the one in front said, his voice carrying easily across the clearing, despite speaking at normal volume. He was tall and lean, with sun-streaked brown hair, and the kind of tan that spoke of a life lived entirely outdoors. "We've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" Elena asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I wasn't supposed to meet with anyone until I reached the valley settlement. Plans change," said a young woman with striking red hair and eyes the color of amber. "Especially when the timing is delicate." Elena noticed that all 5 of them kept glancing at each other in a way that suggested they were communicating somehow, though she couldn't see any obvious signals being passed. "I'm not sure I understand," Elena said carefully. "Are you from the Wildstone Valley community? I have permission from your council to conduct my research." The leader, if that's what he was, stepped closer, and Elena caught a scent that was somehow both familiar and completely foreign. It reminded her of pine forests and mountain storms, but with something underneath that made her skin tingle with awareness. "I'm Kai," he said, extending his hand in a gesture that seemed both welcoming and somehow testing. "And yes, we're from the valley. But Dr. Vasquez, you've arrived at a very complicated time." Eleanor shook his hand, surprised by the warmth of his skin and the strength of his grip. "What kind of complications?" The red-haired woman, who looked like she could be Kai's sister based on similar bone structure, laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The kind that could get you killed if you don't know how to handle yourself." "Mira," Kai said sharply, and the woman fell silent, though her amber eyes never left Elena's face. "Dr. Vasquez," Kai continued, "what do you know about pack dynamics during seasonal cycles?" Elena frowned. It was an odd question, but she was a scientist. In animal populations, pack behavior can become more intense during mating seasons, territorial disputes increase, social hierarchies become more pronounced. Why? The five exchanged another series of looks that Elena was beginning to find unsettling. Because, Kai said carefully, you've just walked into our territory during the most dangerous time of year, and there's only one way to safely get you through it. Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. What do you mean, dangerous? I mean, Kai said, his eyes never leaving hers, that for the next week, everyone in our community will be operating on pure instinct. Rational thought goes out the window. Territorial impulses take over. And an outsider, especially one who doesn't understand our ways, won't survive without protection. Protection from what? Elena asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. From us, Mira said bluntly. From everyone. Dr. Vasquez, you've walked into a community during what we call the heat season, and unless you can prove you belong here, you're going to be seen as either a threat to be eliminated or prey to be claimed. Elena's scientific training warred with a growing sense of unease. I don't understand. You're speaking metaphorically, right? About social pressure and group dynamics. Kai moved closer, close enough that Elena could see flecks of gold in his green eyes. Dr. Vasquez, I need you to listen very carefully. Our community isn't like the ones you've studied before. We have different needs, different instincts. And for the next week, those instincts are going to be in overdrive. What are you trying to tell me? Elena asked, though part of her suspected she already knew. I'm trying to tell you, Kai said quietly, that you've just entered a pack of alphas and omegas during their seasonal cycle. And if you want to survive the next 7 days, you're going to have to convince them that you're under my protection. Elena stared at him, her scientific mind struggling to process what he was suggesting. You're talking about werewolves, actual shapeshifters. We prefer the term pack members, Mira said with a slight smile. But yes, and Dr. Vasquez, the sun is setting, which means the heat begins tonight. So we need to move now. As if to emphasize her point, a howl echoed through the forest from somewhere deeper in the valley. It was answered by another, then another, until the mountains seemed to ring with wild, primal calls that made Eleanor's heart race with equal parts terror and inexplicable excitement. She was no longer conducting research on an isolated human community. She was about to experience something far more dangerous and potentially far more extraordinary than anything she'd ever imagined. Chapter 2. The Only Way. Move where? Eleanor asked, her scientific training warring with every survival instinct that was currently screaming at her to run. And what exactly does under your protection mean? Kai glanced at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. It means you're going to have to trust me completely for the next week. No questions, no arguments, no trying to analyze everything through your academic lens. Another howl echoed through the forest, closer this time, and Elena felt goosebumps rise on her arms. The sound was definitely not from any normal wolf she'd ever heard. Dr. Vasquez, said one of the other pack members, a young man with black hair and startlingly blue eyes. My name is River. I know this is overwhelming, but Kai's right. Once the heat fully begins, rational conversation becomes difficult. Difficult how? Eleanor asked, though she was already following as Kai began leading the group deeper into the forest. Think of it like this, Mira explained, moving with that same predatory grace Elena had noticed earlier. You know how some animals become completely focused on mating and territory during certain seasons? How they'll fight to the death over resources or mates? Yes, Elena said slowly, her anthropologist brain beginning to make connections she wasn't sure she wanted to make. It's like that, but with human intelligence behind it, River continued. Pack members become intensely protective of what they consider theirs, intensely aggressive toward threats, and intensely focused on biological imperatives. Eleanor nearly stumbled over a root. Biological imperatives? Mating, Kai said bluntly, not breaking stride. For the next week, every pack member will be driven by the need to either find a mate or protect the mate they have. Anyone without clear protection will be seen as available. Anyone who seems like a threat will be eliminated. And I fall into which category? Eleanor asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know. Both, Mira said cheerfully. You're an outsider, which makes you a threat, but you're also an unclaimed female in a community full of unmated males, which makes you very interesting prey. Eleanor stopped walking. Prey? Kai turned back to face her, his expression serious. "Dr. Vasquez, Elena, I need you to understand something. What you're about to witness isn't civilized courtship. During the heat, pack dynamics become primal. Alphas compete for omegas. Omegas respond to the strongest alpha. Everyone else either finds protection or gets caught in the crossfire. And you're offering me protection?" Elena asked, studying his face in the growing twilight. "I'm offering you the only chance you have of surviving this," Kai said. "If you agree to be under my protection, other pack members will recognize my claim and leave you alone. But Elena, that protection comes with conditions." Elena felt her heart racing, and not entirely from fear. "What conditions?" "You have to stay close to me at all times. You have to follow my lead without question, and you have to—" Kai paused, seeming to struggle with how to phrase something. "You have to act like you want my protection." "I don't understand," Elena said, though the way Kai was looking at her was making her stomach flutter with something that definitely wasn't scientific curiosity. River cleared his throat. "What Kai's trying to say is that pack members will test the validity of his claim. If they think you're not genuinely under his protection, if they think you're just being coerced or that you don't actually want to be with him, they'll challenge him for you." "Challenge him how?" Elena asked. "Combat," Mira said simply. "To the death if necessary." Elena stared at them, trying to process this information. "You're telling me that in order to survive the next week, I have to pretend to be—" "What exactly? Kai's girlfriend?" "His mate," Kai corrected, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "During the heat, there are no casual relationships. There are only mates and rivals." Another series of howls echoed through the forest, and this time Elena could hear something almost like words in the wild sounds. The pack was communicating, and whatever they were saying was making Kai increasingly tense. "We're out of time for explanations," Kai said urgently. "Elena, I need an answer. Will you accept my protection?" Elena looked around at the 5 faces watching her. In the growing darkness, their eyes seemed to reflect light like actual wolves. Everything logical in her mind said this was insane, that she should demand they escort her back to the helicopter landing pad immediately. But the howls were getting closer, and there was something in the sound that made every primitive instinct she possessed understand that she was in real danger. "What happens after the week is over?" she asked. "After the heat ends, everything goes back to normal," Kai promised. "The pack members remember who they really are, rational thought returns, and you can complete your research or leave, whatever you prefer." "And during the week?" Kai stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "During the week, you're mine, completely, and I protect what's mine." The way he said mine sent a shiver through Elena that had nothing to do with the cold mountain air. There was something primal in his voice, something that spoke to parts of her she'd never known existed. "The alternative?" she asked. "The alternative is that you try to survive on your own," Mira said matter-of-factly. "And trust me, Dr. Vasquez, you won't." Elena looked at Kai, really looked at him. He was handsome in a rugged, outdoorsy way, but more than that, there was something about him that made her feel safe despite the insanity of the situation. And if she was being honest with herself, the idea of being under his protection didn't feel entirely unpleasant. "Okay," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I accept your protection." Kai's relief was visible. "Thank you. Now, we need to get to the valley settlement before full dark." "And Elena?" "Yes? From this moment until the heat ends, you're not Dr. Elena Vasquez, researcher. You're Elena, my mate. Everything depends on you remembering that." As they began moving rapidly through the forest, Elena couldn't help but wonder what she'd just gotten herself into. But when Kai took her hand to help her navigate a particularly tricky section of trail, and she felt that same electric spark she'd noticed earlier, she realized that surviving the next week might be the least of her challenges. The real challenge was going to be remembering that this was all just pretend, even if it was starting to feel surprisingly real. Chapter 3. The Valley Settlement. The Wildstone Valley Settlement was unlike anything Elena had expected. Hidden in a natural bowl surrounded by towering peaks, it looked like something from a fantasy novel. Stone and timber buildings that seemed to grow organically from the landscape, connected by winding paths and lit by lanterns that cast warm pools of light in the darkness. But it was the people that truly took her breath away. As Kai led her through the settlement, Elena became aware of an energy in the air that was almost tangible. Pack members moved through the streets with a fluid grace that seemed barely contained, their eyes reflecting the lamplight like animals. Conversations stopped as they passed, and Elena could feel dozens of gazes assessing her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "They're evaluating you," Kai murmured, his hand warm and steady on her lower back as they walked. "Trying to determine if you're really under my protection or if you're fair game." "How exactly am I supposed to convince them?" Elena asked, acutely aware of how every step they took was being watched. "Stay close to me. Let me guide you." "And Elena?" Kai paused, stopping near a fountain in what appeared to be the settlement's central square. "I need you to understand that some of what happens this week might seem strange or intense. Pack dynamics during the heat aren't like normal human relationships." Before Elena could ask what he meant, a group of young men approached from across the square. Elena immediately tensed. There was something predatory in the way they moved, something that set off every alarm bell her subconscious possessed. "Kai!" the leader called out, his voice carrying a challenge that made the hair on Elena's arms stand up. "Heard you found something interesting in the forest." Elena felt Kai's posture shift beside her, his body language becoming more protective, more territorial. "Marcus," he replied evenly. "Elena is under my protection." Marcus, a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark hair and eyes that seemed to glow in the lamplight, circled them slowly, his gaze never leaving Elena's face. "Is she now? And what makes you think you can claim an outsider during heat season?" "The same thing that's always made it possible," Kai replied, his voice carrying a warning. "Strength and the will to defend what's mine." Elena watched this exchange with growing fascination and alarm. It was like watching a nature documentary about pack behavior, except she was apparently the resource being disputed. "Prove it," Marcus said, stopping directly in front of Elena. "If she's really yours, she'll choose you over a direct challenge." "What kind of challenge?" Elena asked, though she suspected she didn't want to know. Marcus smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "The kind where you have to decide which of us you'd rather have protecting you for the next week." Elena felt Kai tense beside her, and suddenly understood that this was exactly the kind of situation he'd been warning her about. Her response in the next few moments could determine whether this remained a civilized conversation or escalated into something violent. "There's no decision to make," Elena said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. She stepped closer to Kai, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I'm exactly where I want to be." To emphasize her point, she reached for Kai's hand, lacing their fingers together. The contact sent that same electric spark through her system, but more importantly, she could feel Kai's tension ease slightly. Marcus studied them for a long moment, his eyes moving between their joined hands and their faces. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Interesting," he said. "We'll see how long that lasts." As Marcus and his companions melted back into the crowd, Elena realized she was breathing hard. "Does that happen often?" "Challenges during heat season constantly," Kai replied, but his voice carried a note of pride. "You handled that perfectly. Marcus is one of the strongest alphas in the pack. If he accepts my claim, the others will too." Elena looked around the square, noting how the other pack members had gone back to their activities but were still shooting glances in their direction. "So what happens now?" "Now I show you where we'll be staying," Kai said, leading her toward a building on the far side of the square, "and I explain the rules you'll need to follow to stay safe." The building Kai led her to was larger than most of the others, built of warm stone with large windows that overlooked the valley. Inside it was surprisingly comfortable, furnished with handmade furniture that looked both rustic and elegant, with a large fireplace that cast dancing shadows on the walls. "This is beautiful," Elena said, setting down her research pack and looking around with genuine appreciation. "It's my family's home," Kai explained, moving to light additional lanterns. "My parents built it when they first mated. They're traveling this season, visiting pack relatives in the Northern Territories." Elena noticed that he'd said mated rather than married, and filed that observation away with all the other cultural details she was collecting. "Kai," she said, turning to face him, "I need to understand what I've gotten myself into. What exactly are the rules I need to follow?" Kai settled into a chair near the fireplace, gesturing for her to take the one across from him. "The most important rule is that you don't go anywhere alone. During the heat, pack members operate on instinct, and those instincts say that unmated Omegas are available for claiming." "I'm not an Omega," Elena pointed out. "You're not a pack member," Kai corrected, "which makes your status ambiguous. Some alphas might see you as Omega, some might see you as a threat to be eliminated. Either way, you're not safe without protection. Elena nodded, her anthropologist brain filing away these insights into pack hierarchy. What else? Physical contact, Kai said, and Elena noticed a slight flush creeping up his neck. Pack members communicate a lot through touch and scent. If we're going to convince them that you're truly under my protection, we need to act like mates. Act like mates how? Elena asked, though she suspected she knew where this was going. Touch each other frequently. Stay in each other's personal space. Let my scent be on you and yours on me. Kai was clearly struggling with how to explain this. Elena, I know this is asking a lot, but during the heat, pack members can literally smell whether a mating bond is real or fake. Elena felt heat creep up her own neck. So we need to smell like we're together. Exactly, Kai said, relief evident in his voice. Nothing inappropriate, he added quickly. Just enough physical contact that it's believable. Elena studied his face in the firelight. There was something about Kai that made her feel safe, even in this impossible situation. And if she was being honest with herself, the idea of being close to him wasn't entirely unpleasant. Okay, she said. What else do I need to know? The heat affects everyone differently, Kai continued. Some pack members become more aggressive, some become more territorial, some become amorous. You'll need to be able to read the signs and know when to stay close to me. And you, Elena asked, how does the heat affect you? Kai was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. It makes me more protective, he said finally. More possessive. I'll have to fight the urge to keep you locked away somewhere safe, where no other alpha can even see you. There was something in his voice that made Elena's pulse quicken. But you won't actually do that. No, Kai assured her. But I need you to understand that my behavior might seem intense sometimes. It's not personal. It's biological. Elena nodded, though she was beginning to wonder if she could handle 7 days of Kai being more intense than he already was. Chapter 4. The first night. Elena woke to the sound of howling in the distance and the disorienting realization that she wasn't in her tent on a mountainside, but in a comfortable bed in what was apparently a werewolf settlement. For a moment, she wondered if the entire previous day had been an elaborate dream brought on by altitude sickness. Then she noticed the scent. Pine forests and mountain storms, with something underneath that was unmistakably masculine. Kai's scent, which seemed to permeate the entire room. She sat up, realizing she was wearing clothes she didn't remember putting on. Soft cotton pants and a shirt that were definitely too large for her, and smelled strongly of the man who had sworn to protect her. Good morning, came Kai's voice from somewhere nearby. Elena turned to see him sitting in a chair by the window, fully dressed and looking like he'd been awake for hours. Did you sleep at all? Elena asked, running her hands through her hair and trying to remember how she'd gotten changed into these clothes. Some, Kai said, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. The heat makes sleep difficult. Elena noticed that his voice sounded rougher than it had the day before, and when he looked at her, there was something more intense in his gaze. Are you okay? I'm fine, Kai said, but Elena caught him gripping the arms of his chair like he was holding himself in place. How are you feeling? Confused, Elena admitted. I don't remember changing clothes. You were exhausted when we got here last night, Kai explained, his cheeks flushing slightly. Mira helped you get settled while I prepared the sleeping arrangements. Elena looked around the room more carefully and realized there was only one bed. Sleeping arrangements? I slept in the chair, Kai said quickly. But Elena, going forward, we're going to need to share the bed. Elena felt heat flood her cheeks. Share the bed? Not like that, Kai assured her, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely unaffected by the idea. But pack members have extremely sensitive noses. If we're sleeping in separate rooms, they'll know. And if they know, they'll question whether my protection is real. Elena processed this, her scientific mind warring with her personal comfort zone. So, we need to share a bed for appearance's sake. For survival's sake, Kai corrected. Elena, I promise I won't touch you inappropriately, but we need to smell like we're sharing space, sharing intimacy. Before Elena could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Kai's entire body went tense, and Elena caught a glimpse of something almost feral in his eyes before he controlled it. Come in, Kai called, though his voice carried a warning note. Mira entered carrying a tray of food and wearing a knowing smile. Good morning, lovebirds. How was your first night? Elena noticed that Mira was looking between them, with the same assessing gaze she'd seen from other pack members the night before. This was clearly some kind of test. "Wonderful," Elena said, surprising herself with how natural the lie sounded. "Thank you for your help last night." "Of course," Mira said, setting the tray on a small table. "Kai, the pack leaders want to meet with you this morning. Something about territory boundaries and hunting rights." Elena saw Kai's jaw tighten. "I can't leave Elena alone." "Actually," Mira said, her amber eyes gleaming, "they want to meet Elena too. They're curious about the outsider who's caught our strongest alpha's attention." Elena felt her stomach drop. "Meet the pack leaders." "Don't worry," Mira said cheerfully. "It's just a formality. They want to make sure you understand how things work here and that you're not going to cause any problems during the heat." Kai stood, moving to Elena's side with that protective instinct she was beginning to recognize. "When?" "This afternoon," Mira replied, "which gives you the morning to prepare." After Mira left, Elena turned to Kai. "Prepare how?" Kai ran his hands through his hair, clearly struggling with something. "Elena, the pack leaders are going to test our bond. They'll be looking for signs that our relationship is genuine." "What kind of signs?" "Body language, how we interact with each other, whether we smell like mates." Kai's voice was strained. "They'll know if we're faking it." Elena studied his face, seeing the conflict there. "What are you trying to tell me?" "I'm trying to tell you that we need to be more convincing," Kai said quietly. "We need to act like we're really together, really attracted to each other. And Elena, during the heat, that means being very comfortable with physical intimacy." Elena felt her pulse quicken. "Define physical intimacy." "Touching, being in each other's space, acting like we can't keep our hands off each other." Kai's voice was rough with something that might have been desire or might have been frustration. "Elena, I know this is asking a lot, but if the pack leaders don't believe we're genuine, they might decide you're a threat that needs to be eliminated." Elena looked at Kai, really looked at him. He was handsome, protective, and clearly struggling with the situation as much as she was. More importantly, she trusted him. Against all logic and reason, she trusted him completely. "Okay," she said, moving closer to him. "Teach me how to be convincing." Kai's eyes flashed with something that made her breath catch. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Elena said, reaching out to touch his arm. The contact sent that familiar spark through her system, but this time she didn't pull away. "Show me how to be your mate." The way Kai looked at her then made Elena wonder if surviving the heat was going to be the least of her challenges, because the way her body was responding to his proximity suggested that the line between pretending and reality was about to become very blurred indeed. Chapter 5. Learning to be Mates. "First lesson," Kai said, his voice carefully controlled as he stood in front of Elena in the morning light streaming through the windows. "Personal space doesn't exist between mates during the heat. We need to be comfortable touching each other naturally, without hesitation." Elena nodded, though her heart was racing. "Okay, how do we start?" "Like this," Kai said, reaching out to gently take her hands. The contact sent that familiar spark through her system, but this time she didn't pull away. Mates touch constantly, holding hands, casual caresses, standing close enough to share body heat. As if to demonstrate, Kai stepped closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his chest. "Is this okay?" "It's fine," Elena said, though her voice came out slightly breathless. The scent she was beginning to associate with him, pine forests and something indefinably masculine, was stronger now, and she found it surprisingly comforting. "Good," Kai said, releasing one of her hands but keeping the other. "Now, scent marking. Pack members can tell who you've been close to by smell. If we're going to convince them we're mates, you need to smell like me and I need to smell like you." Elena felt heat creep up her neck. "How exactly does scent marking work?" Kai's cheeks flushed slightly. "It's mostly about prolonged contact, sharing clothes, sleeping in the same bed, being close enough that our scents mix naturally." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "Elena, there's something else. In pack culture, mates often nuzzle, touch their faces to each other's necks or shoulders. It's a comfort behavior that also transfers scent." "Show me," Elena said, surprising herself with her boldness. Kai's eyes flashed with something that might have been desire before he controlled it. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering, Elena stepped closer until they were almost chest to chest. "I trust you." Kai's breath caught at her words. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, He lowered his head until his face was near her neck. Eleanor felt the warmth of his breath against her skin, and when he gently nuzzled the spot where her neck met her shoulder, she had to bite back a gasp at the sensation. "Like that," Kai said softly, not moving away. "Mates do this for comfort, for connection, for claiming." Elena found herself tilting her head to give him better access and felt rather than heard Kai's sharp intake of breath. "It feels nice," she admitted. "Eleanor," Kai said, his voice rough with something that definitely wasn't just instructional, "we should practice the other behaviors." But neither of them moved away. Eleanor became aware of how perfectly she fit against Kai's larger frame, how his scent was becoming something she craved rather than simply noticed. When she turned her head slightly, her lips were only inches from his throat. "What other behaviors?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Eye contact," Kai said, pulling back to look at her face. "Mates look at each other like they're the most important thing in the world." Eleanor met his gaze and felt something shift between them. The way Kai was looking at her, with intensity, protectiveness, and something deeper that made her pulse race, didn't feel like acting anymore. "Like this?" she asked. "Exactly like that," Kai replied, his voice strained. "Eleanor, I need you to know that when we're around other pack members, I might seem possessive. During the heat, alphas become very territorial about their mates." "Possessive how?" "Keeping you close, making sure other alphas know you're claimed, being demonstrative about our connection." Kai's hands had moved to her waist, and Elena realized she didn't want him to let go. "It might seem intense, but it's necessary for your safety." Before Elena could respond, they were interrupted by voices outside, pack members moving through the settlement, their conversations carrying that charged energy she was beginning to associate with the heat. "We should get ready," Kai said reluctantly, stepping back. "The pack leaders will want to meet with us soon." Elena nodded, though she felt oddly bereft without his warmth. "Kai, what happens if they don't believe us?" Kai's expression grew serious. "Then they'll either decide you're a threat that needs to be eliminated, or they'll declare you unclaimed and available for any alpha who wants to challenge me for you." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "And if someone challenges you?" "Then I fight," Kai said simply, "and I win, because the alternative is unacceptable." There was something in his voice, a fierce protectiveness that spoke to parts of Elena she'd never known existed. The way he said it with absolute certainty made her believe he could take on anyone who threatened her. "I won't let that happen," Elena said, reaching for his hand again. "I won't let them doubt that I want to be here with you." Kai's eyes flashed with something that looked like surprise and admiration. "Elena, I mean it," she said, squeezing his hand. "Whatever it takes to be convincing, I'll do it." The way Kai looked at her then made Elena's breath catch. "Be careful what you promise," he said softly. "During the heat, whatever it takes might be more than you're prepared for." Chapter 6. The Test of Leaders. The pack leaders met them in a circular stone building at the heart of the settlement, and Elena immediately understood why Kai had been so concerned. There were 5 of them, 3 men and 2 women, and each one radiated the kind of primal authority that made every survival instinct Elena possessed go on high alert. "Kai," the oldest of the men said, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light, "thank you for bringing your mate to meet us." Eleanor caught the slight pause before mate and knew immediately that this was going to be more challenging than she'd anticipated. "Elder Thomas," Kai replied respectfully, his hand warm and steady on Elena's lower back. "May I present Elena, my mate?" The way he said it, with pride and possessiveness, sent a shiver through Eleanor that had nothing to do with fear. "Eleanor," said one of the women, stepping forward with predatory grace. She was stunning, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through to Elena's soul. "I'm Lunacera, alpha female of the Moonstone Pack. We're curious about how an outsider came to claim the attention of one of our strongest alphas." Elena felt the weight of 5 pairs of eyes studying her, evaluating her, looking for signs of weakness or deception. This was the moment Kai had been preparing her for, the test that would determine whether she lived or died. "I didn't come here looking for a mate," Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I came here as a researcher, but sometimes fate has different plans." "Fate," Elder Thomas repeated, his expression skeptical. "How convenient. And what exactly convinced you that Kai was worth abandoning your outside life for?" Eleanor felt Kai tense beside her and suddenly understood that this question was as much a test for him as it was for her. She moved closer to Kai, close enough that their bodies were touching from shoulder to hip. Have you ever met someone who made you feel like you'd been sleepwalking your entire life until that moment? Elena asked, looking up at Kai with what she hoped looked like genuine affection. Someone who made you understand that everything you thought you wanted was just a pale imitation of what you actually needed. The words were supposed to be part of their act, but as Elena said them, she realized they were dangerously close to the truth. Pretty words, said another of the leaders, a man with scars across his face and eyes like winter storms. But words are easy during peacetime. How do we know your bond will hold during the heat? Because, Kai said, his arm tightening around Eleanor's waist, she's already proven she chooses me over safer alternatives. She could have demanded to be taken back to her helicopter. She could have accepted Marcus's challenge last night. Instead, she stays by my side. Interesting, Lunacera said, circling them slowly. And Elena, what happens when Kai becomes more intense during the heat? When his protective instincts become possessive? When he stops asking permission for things that mates simply take? Eleanor felt her cheeks flush at the implication, but she met Lunacera's gaze steadily. Then I trust him to never take more than I'm willing to give, even if what you're willing to give changes as the heat progresses, Lunacera pressed. Eleanor glanced at Kai, seeing something heated in his expression that made her stomach flutter. Especially then, Elder Thomas stepped forward, his expression grave. There's one final test. If you're truly mates, you'll be comfortable with the intimacy that bond requires, even in front of others. Elena felt her heart stop. What kind of intimacy? The kind that proves your bond is real, Lunacera said with a slight smile. Kiss him, Elena, like you mean it, like he's the only man you'll ever want. Elena felt the weight of 5 sets of eyes watching them, evaluating their every move. This was it, the moment that would determine whether her act was convincing enough to save her life. She turned to face Kai fully, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart racing under her palms, could see the conflict in his green eyes as he struggled between protecting her comfort and protecting her life. It's okay, she whispered, just loud enough for the leaders to hear. I want this. And as Elena rose on her toes to meet Kai's lips, she realized that for the first time since this all began, she wasn't acting at all. The kiss started gentle, tentative, but when Kai's arms came around her and pulled her closer, something ignited between them. Elena found herself pressing against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him with a passion that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena caught sight of the pack leader's expressions. Satisfaction, approval, and something that might have been respect. Well, Elder Thomas said with a slight smile, that settles that question. Welcome to the pack, Elena. Try not to get yourself killed during the heat. As they left the meeting, Eleanor realized that somewhere between pretending to be Kai's mate and actually kissing him like she meant it, the line between survival and desire had completely disappeared, and she wasn't sure she wanted to find it again. Chapter 7. The Heat Intensifies. That night, Elena lay in bed listening to the sounds of the heat season reaching its peak throughout the valley. Howls echoed from the surrounding mountains, and even through the closed windows, she could hear the primal calls of pack members responding to biological imperatives that were growing stronger by the hour. Kai sat in the chair by the window, but Elena could see the tension in every line of his body. He'd barely spoken since they returned from the meeting with the pack leaders, and she could sense him struggling with something that went beyond simple protective instincts. Kai, she said softly, sitting up in bed. You don't have to sleep in the chair anymore. The leaders already believe we're mates. Kai's hands gripped the arms of the chair tighter. Elena, you don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking you to trust me the same way I've been trusting you, Elena replied, pulling back the covers to make room for him. And I'm telling you that after today, after that kiss, I don't think we're pretending anymore. Kai turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight in a way that reminded her he wasn't entirely human. Eleanor, the heat affects me too. Being close to you, smelling your scent, feeling how perfectly you fit against me. It's taking everything I have to maintain control. What if I don't want you to maintain control? Eleanor asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Kai was across the room and kneeling beside the bed so quickly that Eleanor barely saw him move. Don't say things like that unless you mean them, he said, his voice rough with desire and restraint. "Because if you keep looking at me like that, if you keep saying things like that, I'm going to stop being a gentleman about this arrangement." Elena reached out to cup his face, feeling the slight roughness of stubble against her palm. "What if I told you that I've been thinking about that kiss all day? What if I told you that when I said those things to the pack leaders about choosing you, about trusting you, I meant every word?" Kai's eyes closed briefly, and when he opened them, Elena saw something that made her breath catch. "Elena, if we cross this line, there's no going back. Not just for the heat season, but ever. Pack matings aren't casual relationships." "I know," Elena said, scooting closer to the edge of the bed so she was at eye level with him. "And I'm telling you that I don't want to go back. I want to go forward, with you." Kai studied her face in the moonlight. "You realize that means staying here, becoming part of the pack, giving up your old life?" Elena had been thinking about exactly that question all day. The life she'd left behind, her research position, her apartment in the city, her carefully controlled academic existence, felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone who had never experienced the kind of connection she felt with Kai, who had never understood what it meant to feel truly protected and cherished. "My old life was just existing," Elena said quietly. "This feels like living." Kai's control finally snapped. He surged up from his knees, capturing her lips in a kiss that was nothing like the careful demonstration they'd shared for the pack leaders. This kiss was desperate, claiming, full of the desire he'd been holding back since the moment they met. Elena responded with equal passion, her hands fisting in his hair as she pulled him closer. When Kai's weight settled beside her on the bed, she felt something click into place, like a puzzle piece finding its proper home. "Are you sure?" Kai asked, his forehead resting against hers as they both struggled to catch their breath. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Elena replied, and meant it completely. As Kai's lips found her throat, Elena realized that she'd come to the mountains looking for an isolated community to study, but instead had found herself. The woman who could match a powerful alpha, who could thrive in a world that operated on instinct and passion rather than logic and control. The heat season had awakened something in her that had nothing to do with supernatural biology and everything to do with finally understanding what it meant to be truly alive. Chapter 8. Dawn of a New Life. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the novel sensation of being completely, perfectly content. Kai's arm was wrapped around her waist, his breath warm against her neck, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "Good morning," Kai murmured against her skin, his voice still rough with sleep. "Good morning," Elena replied, turning in his arms to face him. The sight of his tousled hair and satisfied smile made her heart skip a beat. "Any regrets?" Kai asked, echoing the question that had become familiar between them. "Only that we waited so long," Elena said, leaning up to kiss him softly. "How are you feeling?" "Like the luckiest alpha in the pack," Kai replied, his arms tightening around her. "Elena, what happened between us last night? That wasn't just the heat." "I know," Elena said, tracing patterns on his chest with her finger. "Kai, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about staying here permanently." Kai went very still. "Staying here? Elena, you have a career, a life outside the valley." "I have a job outside the valley," Elena corrected. "But Kai, I've never felt more myself than I have this week. I've never felt more alive, more challenged, more complete than I do when I'm with you in the pack." "You'd give up your research, your academic career?" Elena considered this. "Actually, I think I could contribute more to anthropological understanding from inside this community than I ever could from outside it. There's so much about pack dynamics and supernatural communities that the academic world doesn't understand. I could be a bridge between your world and mine." Kai's smile was brilliant. "You want to be our pack anthropologist?" "I want to be your mate," Elena said simply. "Everything else is just details." Before Kai could respond, they were interrupted by shouting from outside. Both of them tensed, recognizing the sounds of conflict. "Stay here," Kai said, instantly alert as he moved toward the window. "Not a chance," Elena replied, already reaching for her clothes. "If there's trouble, we face it together." Kai looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment, he nodded. "Together," he agreed. They dressed quickly and headed outside to find the settlement in controlled chaos. Pack members were running toward the eastern edge of the valley, and Elena could see what had caused the commotion. A group of strangers stood at the valley's entrance. Humans in expensive outdoor gear with equipment that looked distinctly military. Hunters, Mira said, appearing at their side with her usual perfect timing. They tracked someone's scent from outside the valley. They're looking for supernatural creatures. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. How did they find this place? Someone led them here, Kai said grimly, his protective instincts immediately focusing on Elena. Someone who knew about our community and decided to expose us. Elder Thomas approached with several other pack leaders, his expression grave. Kai, we need to move the pack to the northern caves. These humans have weapons designed specifically for hunting supernatural beings. What about Elena? Kai asked immediately. She comes with us, Elder Thomas said without hesitation. She's pack now. We protect our own. Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest at being accepted so completely. But she also felt a scientist's curiosity about the threat they were facing. What kind of weapons are we talking about? She asked. Silver bullets, electrical nets, tranquilizer darts with compounds that can incapacitate shifters, Lunacera explained. These aren't random hunters. They're professionals. Elena studied the group at the valley entrance, her mind racing. I might be able to help with this. Elena, no, Kai said immediately. I'm not letting you anywhere near those hunters. Kai, I'm still technically an outsider, Elena pointed out. I could approach them, find out what they want, maybe even convince them they're in the wrong place. Absolutely not, Kai growled, his arm coming around her waist possessively. I'm not using my mate as bait. It's not bait if I volunteer, Elena said, though she understood his reluctance. Kai, I can help protect the pack. Let me do this. The pack leaders exchanged glances, clearly weighing the risks and benefits of Elena's proposal. It could work, Lunacera said slowly. If she approaches them as a researcher who got lost, they might not suspect there's a supernatural community here. And if they don't believe her story? Kai asked. Then we fight, Elder Thomas said simply. But Elena's right. This gives us a chance to resolve the situation without violence. Elena looked up at Kai, seeing the conflict in his eyes. Trust me, she said softly. I can do this. Kai studied her face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. But I'm staying close enough to reach you if anything goes wrong. I wouldn't expect anything less, Elena said, rising on her toes to kiss him. After all, that's what mates do. As Elena prepared to potentially save the pack that had become her family, she realized that the scared researcher, who had stumbled into the valley a week ago, was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who belonged somewhere, who was part of something bigger than herself, and who would fight to protect the people she loved. The heat season was ending, but Eleanor's real life was just beginning. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. Elena approached the group of hunters with her heart pounding, but her expression carefully composed. She'd changed into her original research clothes and carried her legitimate academic credentials, hoping to sell the story that she was simply a lost anthropologist who had been studying the area's geological formations. "Excuse me?" she called out as she got within speaking distance, making sure to sound both relieved and slightly confused. "Thank God I found someone. I've been lost for 2 days." The lead hunter, a tall man with military bearing and cold grey eyes, turned to assess her. "Ma'am, this area is dangerous. You shouldn't be out here alone." "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, University of Colorado," Elena said, showing her identification. "I was conducting research on isolated geological formations when my GPS failed. I've been trying to find my way back to the helicopter pickup point." Elena could feel Kai's presence somewhere in the forest behind her, close enough to help if things went wrong, but far enough away that the hunters wouldn't detect him. The knowledge that he was there gave her strength. "Dr. Vasquez," the hunter said, studying her credentials. "I'm Agent Morrison, Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're tracking a dangerous animal that was reported in this area. Have you seen anything unusual?" Eleanor forced herself to look puzzled. "Unusual how? I mean, there's plenty of wildlife, deer, rabbits, some wolves in the distance. Is there a specific animal you're concerned about?" Agent Morrison exchanged glances with his team. "We're looking for evidence of large predators that might pose a threat to hikers. Specifically, animals that display unusually intelligent behavior." Eleanor's anthropologist training kicked in. Morrison's phrasing was careful, professional, but there was something underneath it that suggested he knew exactly what he was really hunting. "Well, I haven't seen anything like that," Elena said, managing to sound appropriately concerned. "Should I be worried? I was planning to continue my research for another few days. Ma'am, I strongly recommend you leave the area immediately, Morrison said. We can escort you to a safe pickup point. Eleanor pretended to consider this, while actually trying to gauge how much these hunters really knew about the pack. Agent Morrison, can I ask what kind of evidence led you to this specific location? As a researcher, I'm curious about animal behavior patterns in remote areas. Morrison's expression sharpened. Why do you ask? Professional interest, Elena said, with what she hoped was an innocent smile. I study isolated communities, both human and animal. If there's unusual predator behavior in this area, it could affect my research parameters. She was walking a dangerous line, but Elena needed to understand whether these hunters were operating on solid intelligence or just following rumors and speculation. Dr. Vasquez, Morrison said slowly, have you encountered any human settlements in this area? Any communities that might not be on official maps? Eleanor felt ice form in her stomach. They knew about the pack settlement. This wasn't a random hunting expedition. This was a targeted operation. No, Eleanor said, maintaining her confused expression. I haven't seen any signs of human habitation. Why? Are there people living out here? Morrison studied her face intently, and Elena could feel him trying to determine whether she was lying. We have reports of a community that's been living off the grid in this valley. People who might be harboring dangerous animals. Elena realized that these hunters weren't just after supernatural creatures, they were after the pack members themselves. The distinction between the human and wolf forms probably didn't matter to them. That's fascinating, Elena said, letting genuine academic interest color her voice. An isolated human community? How long have they been here? What's their social structure like? Dr. Vasquez, Morrison said, his patience clearly wearing thin. I need you to come with us now. This area is about to become very dangerous. Eleanor understood that she was running out of time to gather information or misdirect the hunters. Whatever they were planning, it was going to happen soon. Of course, Eleanor said, shouldering her pack. I appreciate you looking out for my safety. Should I be concerned about these people you mentioned? Are they hostile? Let's just say they're not what they appear to be, Morrison replied cryptically. As Elena began walking with the hunters toward their vehicles, she caught a subtle movement in the forest that she recognized as Kai shadowing their path. She needed to find a way to warn him about what the hunters really knew without compromising her cover. Agent Morrison, Eleanor said as they walked, I'm curious about your equipment. Some of those cases look pretty specialized for wildlife management. Morrison's expression grew suspicious. Why do you ask? I've worked with wildlife researchers before, Eleanor said carefully. That equipment looks more like what you'd use for large predators or... She paused, as if a thought had just occurred to her, or for animals that might be more dangerous than normal wildlife. Morrison stopped walking and turned to face her directly. Dr. Vasquez, what exactly do you know about the creatures in this valley? Elena realized she'd pushed too far. Morrison's hand was moving toward his weapon, and the other hunters were positioning themselves around her. I don't know what you mean, Elena said, but she could hear the strain in her own voice. I think you do, Morrison said, and I think you're going to tell us exactly where to find them. Chapter 10. Pack Family. The confrontation Elena had been dreading was interrupted by a sound that made every hunter in the group freeze, a howl that was definitely not from any normal wolf, followed by answering calls from multiple directions around the valley. What was that? One of the younger hunters asked, his voice tight with fear. Morrison's expression hardened. That was our target. Dr. Vasquez, I suggest you get behind us. But Elena didn't move. Instead, she stood taller, her expression transforming from confused academic to protective pack member. Agent Morrison, I think you should leave. Now. So you do know about them, Morrison said, raising his weapon. How long have you been working with the creatures? They're not creatures, Elena said fiercely. They're people, they're my family. Before Morrison could respond, Kai emerged from the forest, no longer bothering to hide his presence. He was in human form, but there was something distinctly inhuman about the way he moved, the way his eyes reflected the light. Eleanor, Kai said calmly, step away from them. The boyfriend? Morrison asked, swinging his weapon toward Kai. Let me guess, another one of the pack. The alpha, Kai corrected, and his voice carried an authority that made even the armed hunters take a step back. And you're trespassing on pack territory. More pack members began emerging from the forest. Mira, River, Marcus, and others. surrounding the hunters in a loose circle that somehow managed to look both casual and completely threatening. "Agent Morrison," Elena said, finding her voice again, "these people have lived in this valley for generations. They're not harming anyone, they just want to be left alone." "Dr. Vasquez, these are not people," Morrison said, though his voice carried less certainty than before. "They're dangerous predators that pose a threat to human safety." "I am human," Elena said firmly, "and I'm telling you that you're wrong. I've lived with this pack for a week. I've seen how they care for each other, how they protect their own, how they've built a sustainable community that works in harmony with their environment." She moved closer to Kai, taking his hand in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "These people saved my life. They welcomed me into their family. They're not monsters. They're the most honorable people I've ever met." Morrison looked around at the pack members surrounding them, clearly recognizing that his team was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. "Dr. Vasquez, you don't understand what you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly," Elena said. "I'm dealing with people who love each other, who protect their own, and who deserve to live in peace." Elder Thomas stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Agent Morrison, you and your team are welcome to leave the valley unharmed, but if you choose to stay, you'll be treated as the threat you represent." Morrison raised his weapon toward Elder Thomas, but before he could fire, Elena stepped between them. "Stop," she said firmly. "Agent Morrison, look around you. Look at your situation. You're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and completely out of your depth. But more than that, you're wrong about these people." She gestured to the pack members surrounding them. "Yes, they're different. Yes, they have abilities that you don't understand. But they're not evil. They're not dangerous to innocent people. They're a family." "Dr. Vasquez, step aside," Morrison ordered. "No," Elena said, her voice carrying the same authority she'd heard in Kai's. "I won't let you hurt my pack." The word "my" seemed to surprise everyone, including Elena herself. But as she said it, she realized it was completely true. This was her pack, her family, her home. Morrison looked around at the determined faces surrounding him, clearly recognizing that his mission had failed before it had truly begun. After a long moment, he lowered his weapon. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," Elder Thomas replied calmly. "Because Dr. Vasquez is going to write a very thorough report about her time studying the geological formations in this area. A report that will conclude that there's nothing here except wildlife and beautiful scenery." Elena nodded. "My academic reputation will support that conclusion. And Agent Morrison, I suggest you tell your superiors that your investigation found no evidence of the supernatural activity you were looking for." Morrison stared at her for a long moment, then at the pack members who had risked themselves to protect their home. Finally, he nodded to his team. "We're leaving," he said. "But Dr. Vasquez, if you change your mind about what you've seen here—" "I won't," Elena said firmly, "because I've finally found where I belong." As the hunters retreated from the valley, Elena felt Kai's arms come around her from behind. The rest of the pack gathered around them, and she realized that she'd never felt more protected, more valued, or more at home in her entire life. "So," Mira said with a grin, "ready for the rest of your life as a pack member?" Elena leaned back against Kai's chest, watching the sun set over the valley that had become her home. "I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be." "Any regrets?" Kai murmured in her ear, their familiar question taking on new meaning. Elena thought about the life she'd left behind, the career she'd abandoned, the safe, predictable existence she'd traded for love and danger, and a family that would fight to protect her, just as fiercely as she'd fought to protect them. "Only that it took me so long to find you all," she said. As the pack celebrated their victory and Elena's permanent acceptance into their family, she realized that sometimes the best research discoveries weren't the ones you went looking for. Sometimes they were the ones that found you, changed you, and showed you exactly who you were meant to be. She'd entered a pack during their most dangerous season and discovered that survival wasn't just about making it through. It was about finding the place where you belonged, the people who would fight for you, and the love worth risking everything to protect. The heat season was over, but Elena's life as a pack member was just beginning. The end.